It was nice. It was a little bit of a break in the nightmare we were going through.
Michigan truck driver Joe Filbert is back at work today.
On a regular day with all this bullcrap going on, it's a beautiful sight. And it really, as a driver, it broke my spirits to see that the bridge was down.
Making the 1.5-mile trip on the Ambassador Bridge in his big rig over the Detroit River and into Canada.
I'm displeased at how Justin Castro Trudeau handled the situation.
It's Filbert's first trip since the bridge shut down. Demonstrations erupted when a group of Canadian truckers, calling themselves the Freedom Convoy, and their supporters united in defiance against strict vaccine mandates in their country.
No more mandates, no more passports, no more lockdowns. Let us live our lives.
Bringing traffic to a standstill at the biggest commercial crossing between the United States and Canada, with $300 million worth of goods crossing each day, and about a third are connected to the auto industry.
We need to stop this. I can't take this anymore.
This protest is illegal. This demonstration is illegal. It's okay to protest. It's not okay to commandeer the roadway to the busiest border crossing in North America.
But on this morning, though traffic is once again moving, the city of Windsor looks different. Police here not taking any chances.
It kind of bummed me out also when I came across the bridge and I seen that the police presence, it's now a police state.
Now entering its third week, demonstrations across Canada have interrupted commerce, blocked key border crossings, and clogged cities.
Yeah, we're fighting for freedom, my man! We're gonna keep fighting!
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today invoking emergency powers for the first time since the law was created.
The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country.
It began in January in the Canadian capital of Ottawa, when the government implemented COVID-19 vaccine requirements for truckers crossing the U.S.-Canada border. While the Canadian Trucking Alliance estimates 85 to 90% of the 120,000 Canadian truckers who drive cross-border routes are in fact vaccinated. The new mandate igniting a firestorm. Over the weekend, the group growing to an estimated 40,000 people demonstrating in front of Parliament, including some counter-protesters who want their city back. The protests spreading across the country, from Nova Scotia to the Peace Bridge connecting Canada to Buffalo. At one blockade in Coots along the Montana border, an alarming discovery. Canadian police today arresting 13 individuals found with weapons, including a machete and high-capacity magazines.
These weapons were brought by people who had the intent on causing harm.
The Canadian protest inspiring action not just across the border, but oceans as well. Large protests against the COVID-19 restrictions erupting in the Netherlands. And over the weekend, tear gas clouding Paris as protesters clashed with police and more than 50 were arrested. Back in Windsor, Joe Filbert drives one of the 7,000 trucks that make the cross into Ontario daily. Many, like him, hauling important supplies for Detroit area auto manufacturers.
Everyone's heard the brotherhood between Windsor and Detroit to even make a car. Sometimes those parts may go back and forth across the border several times. It might go from a frame to having suspension put on to being shipped back to have an engine put in, or vice versa, or whatever.
It's multiple trips.
Multiple trips.
Despite the bridge now being open, damage is already done. Experts say last week alone, workers in Michigan may have lost up to $51 million in wages.
It's one thing to have some disruption in your neighborhood or in your capital city. You do it for 18 days and it affects your economy, it affects your ability to send your kids to school. And you heard from the Prime Minister and his team today that this is having very severe economic impacts on not only Canada, but the United States.
Following unrest in the capital, the movement reached Windsor last week, with protesters parking big rigs at the mouth of the bridge, eventually shutting down all traffic.
If we don't stand up right now for this, there won't be another time to do it.
The crowd ballooning this weekend as the blockade finally came to a head. After warnings on Friday from law enforcement, enforcing a court-ordered injunction to end the siege.
even though a judge passed an order that Ambassador Bridge should be clear for traffic by around 7 o'clock tonight. As you can see, the protesters aren't going anywhere.
By Saturday morning, the two sides had their first clash as law enforcement arrived in force and began clearing the bridge. Hours later, the big rigs began departing.
We're watching law enforcement push away from the entry point of the Ambassador Bridge. The protesters' area is getting smaller and smaller.
But by nightfall, protesters on foot and in pickups still remain defiant.
Freedom is all we ask for. Freedom.
We've heard your frustration with COVID, with the measures that are there to keep people safe. We've heard you. It's time to go home now.
If you do not leave the area, you will be arrested.
By Sunday morning, law enforcement cleared the last of the protesters in Windsor, making almost 30 arrests.
Day 7 of the protests, and it looks like law enforcement is finally making its last push. You can see no protesters behind me. They're not even letting media back here. They're telling us to move back.
Off the sidewalk, please.
Though the Ambassador Bridge is now open, questions remain about the motives behind this nationwide movement.
Most people are there for peaceful causes. There is a small percentage of those that are there that I do have concerns. You would put them in an extremist category in the way that they think that violence might be part of the solution to address their grievance.
Some experts say the protests are a product of foreign influence, citing various crowdfunding efforts.
I think we'll see more freezing of funds, more shutting down of those crowdfunded sites. That's a good thing, in part because there are some early indications that perhaps some of the money that has been flowing to these groups might not be coming from just good citizens.
Today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced he's loosening the province's pandemic restrictions, but stressing his decision is unrelated to the protests.
We're moving in this direction because it's safe to do so. Today's announcement is not because of what's happening in Ottawa or Windsor, but despite it.
While the protesters in Windsor might have lost the battle with law enforcement this weekend, it's clear the sentiment isn't going away.
The whole world's watching. They're going to move us out of here today. We'll be back.
We're standing for Canada, and we're not going to quit. We're not going to give up, ever.
We're not going away. We'll be back.
Michigan trucker Joe Filbert was able to get back on the road today, but he thinks his Canadian counterparts are far from done.
It takes a lot for a human being to deal with single-digit temperatures for hours on end in defiance. And so that tells me right there, if you have enough resolve to sit there and stand in that type of inclement weather, you'll be back.
And it must be really frustrating.
Oh, extremely so. And anybody who's been following the protests would be stupid to think that it's done.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.